Every year, millions of drivers across the United States take to the road believing they understand the rules that govern their daily commute. Traffic signs are familiar, speed limits appear routine, and most drivers assume that the laws guiding their behavior behind the wheel remain relatively stable. But in reality, traffic laws are constantly evolving. Legislatures across multiple states regularly review road safety data, accident statistics, and technological changes to determine whether updates to driving regulations are necessary. Sometimes these updates involve small adjustments to existing rules. Other times they introduce entirely new enforcement policies that many drivers may not immediately recognize. According to official transportation reports, thousands of traffic citations are issued every single day across the country. Many of those citations occur not because drivers intended to break the law, but because they were unaware that certain regulations had changed. In some cases, the difference between a routine drive and a costly fine can come down to a rule that was updated only recently, and that is exactly why the latest wave of driving law changes has attracted attention from transportation officials, legal analysts, and everyday drivers alike. Some of these updates involve how drivers use their phones while operating a vehicle. Others relate to speed enforcement, highway behavior, or the responsibilities drivers have when approaching emergency vehicles. While the specific details vary between states, the overall trend is clear. Lawmakers are attempting to address modern driving risks that did not exist decades ago. But here's the question. If new driving laws take effect and millions of drivers are not fully aware of them, who is responsible when violations occur? Should drivers be expected to track every legal update on their own? Or should government agencies ensure that the public is fully informed before enforcement begins? Let me know your answer in the comments below. To understand the significance of these recent changes, it helps to step back and examine how traffic regulations in the United States are actually created and enforced. Unlike some countries where national governments control road laws at the federal level, the United States operates under a decentralized system. This means that each state has its own authority to create and modify traffic regulations. State legislatures draft the laws, governors sign them into effect, and state or local law enforcement agencies are typically responsible for enforcing them. Because of this structure, driving laws can vary widely depending on where someone lives. A regulation implemented in one state may not exist at all in another. For example, some states enforce strict hands-free driving laws that prohibit drivers from holding a phone while driving. Other states may allow limited phone use under certain conditions. Similarly, automated traffic enforcement systems, such as red light cameras or speed cameras, may be common in some cities but restricted or banned in others. These differences can create challenges, especially for drivers who travel frequently between states. Transportation experts often point out that the average driver rarely reads updated legislative documents or transportation agency reports. Instead, most people learn about traffic rules during the initial driver licensing process and rely on that knowledge for years or even decades afterward. But when laws evolve, that outdated understanding can sometimes lead to unintended violations. In recent years, lawmakers have been particularly focused on improving road safety. Traffic fatalities and serious injury crashes have remained a concern for transportation agencies nationwide. According to national safety reports, a significant percentage of serious accidents involve behaviors such as distracted driving, excessive speed, impaired driving, or failure to follow basic road safety rules. Because of this data, legislators often respond by updating the legal framework surrounding driver behavior. These updates can include higher fines, expanded enforcement authority, or entirely new categories of violations. However, when such changes occur, they are not always immediately obvious to the general public. A new regulation might be announced through official press releases, government websites, or public safety campaigns. Yet many drivers may never encounter those announcements. Instead, the first time they hear about a rule change may be during a traffic stop or after receiving a citation in the mail. Legal experts often emphasize that ignorance of the law is rarely accepted as a legal defense in traffic cases. Courts generally operate under the assumption that licensed drivers have a responsibility to remain aware of the laws governing road use. However, the practical reality is more complicated. Traffic codes are extensive documents containing hundreds of provisions that regulate everything from vehicle equipment requirements to right-of-way rules. For the average driver, keeping track of every amendment can be difficult, and that is why some of the latest updates to driving laws have generated significant public discussion. Some drivers support stricter enforcement if it leads to safer roads. others worry that complex or rapidly changing regulations may result in unfair penalties for drivers who simply did not know the rules had changed. Transportation policy experts say the debate often centers on one key issue: balance. On one hand, governments have a responsibility to protect public safety. On the other hand, regulations must be clear, transparent, and reasonably communicated so that drivers can realistically follow them. Understanding that balance is essential when examining the newest driving law updates that are beginning to take effect across various states. Because while the headlines may suggest urgent nationwide changes, the actual legal landscape is more nuanced. Some rules are brand new, others are expansions of existing laws, and a few are simply clarifications designed to make enforcement easier. In the next section, we'll examine the background behind these updates and explore why lawmakers believe changes to traffic laws are necessary at this moment in time. As lawmakers across the United States continue reviewing traffic safety data, the conversation about new driving laws has become increasingly focused on how modern driving habits are changing the risks on the road. According to transportation safety studies and public safety reports, the nature of driving today is very different from what it was even 15 or 20 years ago. Vehicles themselves have become more technologically advanced. Many cars now include large digital displays, advanced driver assistance systems, integrated navigation tools, and smartphone connectivity features. While these technologies can improve convenience and safety when used properly, they can also create new forms of distraction if drivers divide their attention between the road and digital interfaces. Traffic safety officials frequently highlight distracted driving as one of the most significant challenges facing modern road safety efforts. Data compiled by various transportation agencies has shown that even a few seconds of diverted attention can significantly increase the risk of a crash. Because of this, many states have introduced or strengthened hands-free driving laws. These laws typically require drivers to operate their phones only through voice commands, dashboard systems, or mounted devices, rather than holding the phone directly while driving. According to official statements from several state transportation departments, the purpose of these laws is not to eliminate communication entirely, but to reduce the physical and visual distraction associated with handheld phone use. However, enforcement of these laws can sometimes create confusion among drivers. Some drivers may believe that briefly glancing at a phone or touching a screen is permitted, while certain laws define even momentary handling of a device as a violation. In other cases, drivers may not realize that using certain applications while stopped at a red light may still be restricted depending on state law. Legal analysts often point out that the wording of these statutes can vary significantly between jurisdictions, which is why drivers are encouraged to review the specific regulations that apply in the state where they are operating a vehicle. Another area that lawmakers have increasingly focused on involves the responsibilities drivers have when approaching emergency vehicles on the road. Many states have adopted or strengthened what are commonly known as move-over laws. These laws generally require drivers to slow down and, when possible, move into an adjacent lane when approaching police vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, or roadside service vehicles displaying emergency lights. Transportation officials say these laws exist primarily to protect first responders and roadside workers who may be assisting motorists or managing incidents on the shoulder of a highway. According to official safety campaigns, a significant number of roadside injuries occur when passing vehicles fail to reduce speed or change lanes near emergency scenes. Because of this risk, several states have increased the penalties for violations of move-over laws, sometimes including higher fines or additional license points. Another topic that has generated discussion among drivers involves updates to speed enforcement policies. Speed limits themselves may not change dramatically from year to year, but enforcement strategies sometimes evolve based on safety data. In some areas, local governments have expanded the use of automated traffic enforcement systems, such as speed cameras or red light cameras. These systems are designed to capture photographic evidence of certain traffic violations and issue citations to the registered vehicle owner. Supporters argue that automated enforcement can help reduce dangerous driving behaviors in high-risk areas such as school zones or busy urban intersections. Critics, however, sometimes raise concerns about transparency, due process, or whether such systems prioritize revenue generation over safety goals. Courts in various jurisdictions have addressed these issues in different ways, and the legality of automated enforcement programs often depends on the specific legislative framework of each state. Another category of legal updates relates to penalties and fines. Even when the underlying rule remains the same, lawmakers may adjust the financial consequences associated with violations. For example, fines for distracted driving, speeding in school zones, or failing to yield to emergency vehicles may increase over time as part of broader road safety initiatives. Transportation policy experts explain that these adjustments are sometimes intended to create stronger deterrents against behaviors that have been linked to serious crashes. However, critics sometimes argue that increased penalties can disproportionately affect drivers who may already face financial challenges. Because of these concerns, discussions about traffic law enforcement often involve balancing public safety priorities with fairness and accessibility. It is also important to understand that not every traffic law change applies nationwide at the same time. In the United States, traffic regulation remains largely under state authority. That means a rule taking effect in one state may not exist in another, or it may be implemented on a different timeline. Drivers who frequently travel across state lines, such as commercial drivers, delivery workers, or road trip travelers, may therefore encounter a variety of legal environments depending on their location. Legal experts often recommend that drivers periodically review official State Department of Transportation or Motor Vehicle Agency websites to stay informed about regulatory updates. Many states also publish driver handbooks or public safety announcements that explain changes in simplified terms. Still, despite these resources, public awareness of new traffic laws can sometimes lag behind the laws themselves. A driver who learned the rules many years ago might reasonably assume that most regulations remain unchanged. But over time, incremental legislative updates can gradually reshape the legal landscape of driving. This raises an interesting legal and policy question. When laws change quickly, how should governments ensure that the public receives adequate notice? Some agencies address this challenge through media campaigns, digital alerts, or partnerships with driving schools and insurance providers. Others rely primarily on official publications and press releases, assuming that licensed drivers maintain responsibility for staying informed. From a legal standpoint, courts generally maintain the principle that drivers are responsible for knowing the rules that apply to operating a motor vehicle. However, in practice, judges and legal professionals often recognize that education and outreach remain important components of effective traffic safety policy. Ultimately, the goal of most traffic law updates is not simply to increase citations or penalties. Instead, lawmakers and safety officials often emphasize prevention. If updated regulations encourage safer driving behaviors, such as reducing distractions, slowing down near emergency scenes, or respecting speed limits in sensitive areas, then the long-term result may be fewer accidents, fewer injuries, and safer roads for everyone. Still, every new law inevitably raises questions. Drivers may wonder whether enforcement will be consistent. Legal analysts may examine whether regulations are clearly written and constitutionally sound. And policymakers may continue debating the best methods for improving road safety without placing unnecessary burdens on the public. That ongoing conversation is part of how the legal system adapts to changing circumstances. Driving is one of the most common activities people perform every day, yet it operates within a detailed legal framework that continues evolving over time. For drivers, staying informed about these changes can help avoid unexpected fines and ensure compliance with current regulations. And for policymakers, the challenge remains finding the right balance between enforcement, education, and fairness. So as new driving law updates take effect across different parts of the country, the most practical step for drivers may simply be awareness. Understanding the rules that apply where you drive can make the difference between a routine trip and an avoidable legal issue. And it also contributes to the broader goal shared by transportation officials nationwide, keeping roads as safe as possible for drivers, passengers, and pedestrians alike. But before we close, there's one final question worth considering. When new traffic laws are introduced to improve road safety, do you believe stricter enforcement actually changes driver behavior, or do most drivers only adjust their habits after receiving a citation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're interested in more legal breakdowns of real traffic laws, enforcement practices, and driver rights, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss future updates. Because when it comes to driving laws, staying informed isn't just useful, it can also help you avoid costly mistakes the next time you get behind the wheel.